Son, the last time someone pointed a weapon at my head, he didn't get a second chance to think about it. The words came low and steady, like gravel under a boot, cutting clean through the morning air before anyone could laugh them off. The cadets did laugh anyway. Tyler Brooks let out a short, sharp chuckle, tightening his grip as the matte black training pistol hovered inches from the old man's temple, the molded frame catching a dull glint from the rising Virginia sun. The memorial field stretched wide behind them, rows of polished brass plaques set into concrete, each one catching the early light like silent witnesses. A flag snapped somewhere in the distance, the wind carrying the faint scent of cut grass and machine oil from the nearby motor pool. None of it seemed to touch the man standing in front of them. Elias Mercer didn't move. Not when the barrel lifted. Not when Tyler stepped closer, boots crunching on gravel. Not even when Logan Pierce circled behind him, snorting under his breath as if they'd stumbled onto some kind of joke. "You deaf or just stubborn?" Tyler said, voice sharpened by the need to perform, to show control in front of the others. Noah Reed shifted to the side, glancing briefly at the small cluster of onlookers near the edge of the training zone, families, a couple off-duty Marines, a groundskeeper holding a rake mid-motion. No one stepped in. Regulations said this was cadet jurisdiction for the morning exercise. Authority, even borrowed, had weight. Tyler leaned in, the pistol steady now, pressing closer without quite making contact. "Restricted area," he said. "You don't belong here." Elias finally turned his head, slow, deliberate, just enough for his pale blue eyes to meet Tyler's. There was no anger in them. No fear. Just a depth that didn't match the wrinkles or the worn jacket hanging loose on his frame. It was the kind of look that didn't react, it measured. It remembered. "You're holding it wrong," Elias said quietly. The words landed softer than the wind, but they carried farther. Tyler blinked once, thrown off for half a second, then scoffed. "Oh yeah? You gonna teach me?" Logan laughed behind him, nudging Noah. "Guy probably watched too many old war movies." Tyler adjusted his stance, squaring his shoulders, making a show of tightening his grip. "Looks fine to me." Elias's gaze didn't leave the weapon. "Your fingers tense," he said. "And your stance is off by half an inch. In a real situation, that's enough to miss everything that matters." The air shifted. Not visibly, not loudly, but something in the space between them grew heavier, like pressure building before a storm. Noah's smirk faded just a fraction. Tyler felt it too, though he couldn't name it. Irritation flared in its place. "This isn't a real situation," Tyler snapped. "This is training. And right now, you're interfering with it." He reached out with his free hand, shoving lightly at Elias's shoulder. The old man didn't step back. The contact barely registered. It was like pushing against something rooted deeper than muscle. Gravel crunched again as Tyler shifted, forcing the moment forward. "Hands where I can see them," he ordered. Elias lifted his hands slowly, palms open, movements controlled, economical. No wasted motion. No hesitation. The wind picked up, tugging at the frayed edge of his jacket, revealing a glimpse of something worn and dark tucked just beneath the fabric, a cord, old and faded, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. Tyler wasn't. Not yet. He kept his focus on the act, on the posture, on the eyes watching from the sidelines. "That's better," he said, voice louder now, for the audience more than the man in front of him. "Should have done that from the start." Elias said nothing. He just stood there, breathing slow, steady, as if the barrel near his head was nothing more than a distant inconvenience. And somewhere beyond the cadets, beyond the plaques and the snapping flag, a staff sergeant paused mid-step, watching the scene unfold with a narrowing gaze, a quiet recognition forming before a single word had been spoken aloud. Tyler held the stare a moment longer than he needed to, as if refusing to blink would somehow prove control, but the longer it stretched, the more it felt like he was the one being measured, not the other way around, and that irritated him in a way he could not explain. He shifted his weight, boots grinding against the gravel, and forced a smirk back onto his face. "You talk like you have been here before," he said, voice edged with sarcasm, but it came out thinner than he intended. Elias Mercer did not answer right away. His eyes moved once, slow and deliberate. Not toward the cadets, but across the memorial field, tracing the line of plaques as if reading names that were not spoken aloud. The wind pushed through again, stronger this time, lifting the loose edge of his jacket and carrying with it a faint metallic scent from the flagpole chains. When he spoke, his voice stayed low, steady, the same tone a man might use to comment on the weather. "I have stood in places where boys were given authority before they understood what it meant," he said. "It usually ends the same way." Logan scoffed louder this time, stepping closer, arms crossed, feeding off Tyler's posture. "Yeah. And how is that?" he asked. Elias turned his head just enough to meet his eyes. "With silence," he said. The word landed heavier than it should have. Noah shifted again, his earlier confidence starting to crack at the edges, though he tried to hide it by glancing back toward the small group watching from a distance. A couple of them had stopped pretending not to look. One older Marine stood with his arms folded, expression unreadable, eyes locked on Elias in a way that felt different from the rest. Tyler caught the glance and felt the need to reassert control tighten in his chest. "Enough," he said sharply. "You are not here to give speeches." He gestured with the pistol, the motion slightly too quick now. "You are here because you walked into a restricted zone and refused a direct order." Elias did not argue. He did not explain. He simply lowered his gaze to the ground in front of him for a brief second, then lifted it again, calm as ever. "Then do what you think you need to do," he said. The words should have sounded like surrender. They did not. They sounded like permission. Tyler frowned, something about that tone pressing against his instincts in a way that training had never covered. He reached forward with his free hand, this time grabbing the front of Elias's jacket and pulling it slightly open, searching for something that would justify the situation, something official, something he could point to and say he had been right. The fabric gave easily, worn from years of use, and that was when he saw it clearly for the first time. A thin length of faded paracord rested against the old man's chest, darkened with age, holding a single piece of metal that did not match anything in the current uniform regulations. It was not polished. It was not standard issue. It looked like it had been through fire and time and had never been replaced. Tyler frowned deeper, confusion flickering across his face before he masked it again with a dismissive laugh. "What is this supposed to be?" he said, hooking a finger under the cord and lifting it slightly. The metal turned in the light, dull and uneven, catching just enough of the sun to show its worn edges. Elias's eyes followed the movement, and for the first time, something shifted beneath the surface. Not anger. Not fear. Something older. He did not reach for it. He did not stop Tyler. But his voice, when it came, was quieter than before, and somehow heavier. "That," he said, "is not something you understand by looking at it." Tyler smirked, but it did not reach his eyes. "Try me," he said. And just a few yards away, Staff Sergeant Daniel Hayes took a slow step forward, his jaw tightening as the pieces in front of him began to align in a way he did not like at all. Tyler let the cord slip between his fingers, but he did not release it completely, as if holding onto it gave him some kind of leverage he could not quite define, and the smirk on his face hardened into something sharper, something that needed to win. "Looks like scrap," he said, louder now, making sure the small crowd could hear him, feeding off the attention like it was part of the exercise. Logan leaned in, squinting at the metal tag, then let out a short laugh. "Yeah, probably picked it up at a flea market," he added. "You can get this kind of stuff for $10. Noah did not laugh this time, but he did not speak either. His eyes stayed on Elias, watching the way the old man stood, the way his shoulders remained loose, the way his breathing never changed. It did not match the situation. It did not match anything Noah had been taught about compliance or fear. Tyler gave the cord a small tug, pulling it away from Elias's chest just enough to test him. "You hear that?" he said. "Souvenir." Elias's gaze dropped briefly to the cord, then lifted again, calm and steady. "It is not a souvenir," he said. Tyler rolled his eyes. "Then what is it, exactly?" he pressed. Elias did not answer. The silence stretched again, heavier this time, and it started to draw attention in a way Tyler did not like. He felt it slipping, the control of the moment, the narrative he had built in his head. So he pushed harder. "You know what I think?" Tyler said, tightening his grip on the cord again. "I think you are one of those guys who walks around pretending. Old stories, fake gear, hoping someone will salute you." Logan nodded immediately, stepping closer, crossing into Elias's space without hesitation. "Yeah, stolen valor," he said, the words landing with practiced confidence. A few of the onlookers shifted uncomfortably at that, the term carrying weight even in casual conversation. Tyler seized it. "Exactly," he said. "That is what this looks like." He let the cord drop finally, but only to brush it aside dismissively, as if it did not matter. "And right now, you are interfering with a military training operation while doing it." Elias did not react to the accusation. Not visibly. But something in his eyes changed again, not in intensity, but in depth, as if the distance behind them had grown longer. "You are very certain," he said quietly. Tyler took a step closer, closing the gap again, the training pistol still held up, though now it wavered just slightly. "I do not need to be certain," he snapped. "I just need to be in charge here." The words hung in the air, sharper than he intended, and for a brief second, even Logan glanced at him sideways. Noah swallowed, his attention drifting again toward the edge of the field. The older Marine he had noticed earlier had not moved. His arms were still folded, but his posture had changed, more rigid now, more alert. And just behind him, Staff Sergeant Hayes had stepped closer than before, his boots silent on the gravel, his eyes locked on the cord that had been lifted, then on the man wearing it. Hayes did not interrupt. Not yet. But his presence alone shifted the air. Tyler noticed it this time. He turned his head slightly, catching sight of the staff sergeant, and something defensive flared in his chest. "You got something to say, Staff Sergeant," he called out, forcing confidence back into his tone. Hayes did not answer right away. His gaze moved once more from Elias to the cadets, then back again, as if confirming something only he could see. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, controlled, and carried just enough to reach them without effort. "You might want to think real carefully about what you do next," he said. Tyler let out a short laugh, but it came out thinner than before. "With respect, Staff Sergeant, this is a cadet-controlled exercise," he replied. Hayes nodded once, slow, deliberate. "It is," he said. Then his eyes returned to Elias Mercer, and his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "That does not mean you are in control of the situation." The words from Staff Sergeant Hayes did not land like a warning, they landed like a weight, something slow and deliberate that settled into the space between them, and for a brief moment even the wind seemed to hesitate as if listening. Tyler felt it, a flicker of uncertainty pressing against the edge of his confidence, but he pushed it down fast, forcing a tight smile back into place. "I think I have it handled," he said, his voice carrying just enough edge to reassert control, though it no longer carried the same ease. Hayes did not argue. He did not step in. He simply watched, his eyes narrowing slightly, not on the cadets, but on Elias Mercer, studying the stillness the way a seasoned Marine studies terrain before stepping forward. Tyler turned back, refocusing on the old man as if the interruption had never happened. "You heard him," Tyler said, gesturing loosely with the pistol. "You are making this more complicated than it needs to be." Elias said nothing. He did not shift his weight. He did not adjust his stance. He simply stood, hands still raised, gaze steady, the morning light catching faint lines across his face that looked less like age and more like something carved by time and pressure. Tyler's jaw tightened. He needed movement. He needed reaction. So he reached forward again, this time grabbing the paracord more firmly, pulling it away from Elias's chest until the worn metal tag hung fully exposed between them. The cord stretched slightly, old fibers resisting just enough to remind him it had been tied that way for a long time. "Let us try this again," Tyler said, holding the tag up at eye level. "What is it?" The metal turned slowly in his fingers, catching the sunlight in uneven flashes, revealing edges that were not clean, not manufactured in any standard way, as if it had been broken from something else long ago. Logan leaned in closer, squinting. "It does not even look official," he muttered. "There is no engraving, no unit mark, nothing." Noah stepped half a pace forward, his eyes narrowing, not mocking now, but searching. There was something about it that did not fit with the joke they had been building. Tyler shook his head, dismissing it. "Exactly," he said. "Nothing." He flicked the tag lightly with his finger, a small metallic click cutting through the quiet like a stone dropped into still water. The sound lingered longer than it should have. Elias's eyes followed the motion, and for the first time, there was a shift that even Tyler could see, not in his posture, but in the way his focus narrowed, as if the world had just reduced itself to that one small piece of metal. The air changed again. Not louder. Not faster. Just heavier. The distant sounds of the base seemed to fade, the hum of vehicles, the faint call of commands from another training area, all of it dimming beneath something older that pressed quietly into the moment. Tyler hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, the tag still suspended between his fingers. "What?" he said, forcing a scoff. "You are going to tell me this thing is important?" Elias's voice came softer than before, almost lost to the wind, but it carried a weight that pulled every ear toward it. "You should not have touched that," he said. No threat. No raised tone. Just a statement. Tyler felt a chill he did not expect, irritation rising immediately to cover it. "Why?" he demanded. Elias did not answer right away. His gaze remained locked on the tag, and when he finally spoke, it was not to Tyler, not entirely, but to something that existed far beyond the memorial field. "Because the last time that piece of metal was taken off someone," he said slowly, "it was done in a place where no one had the luxury of making mistakes twice." The word settled over the group like a shadow. Logan shifted his stance, the confidence in his expression faltering. Noah's eyes flicked from the tag to Elias, then toward Hayes, who had taken another step closer, his posture now unmistakably alert. Tyler tightened his grip again, but the motion lacked its earlier certainty. "You are talking in circles," he said, though his voice had dropped slightly. Elias finally lifted his eyes from the tag and met Tyler's gaze again, and this time there was something unmistakable behind them, not anger, not fear, but memory, deep and unshakable. "No," Elias said quietly. "You are standing in one." The metal tag slipped from Tyler's fingers for just a fraction of a second, and that was all it took for the moment to fracture. It did not fall. The cord held it in place, swaying slightly against Elias Mercer's chest, catching the morning light in a dull, uneven shimmer. But something else had already shifted. The memorial field faded, not physically, but in the way sound changes when memory takes hold. The wind that had carried the smell of fresh-cut grass turned heavy, thick, carrying something older, something that did not belong to this place. Elias did not move, but his eyes no longer saw the cadets. They were looking through them, past them, into a distance none of the others could follow. The quiet stretched, and then it broke without a sound. The air was no longer cool and open. It pressed in, dense and humid, filled with the weight of a different sky. The ground beneath his boots was no longer gravel, but soft earth, uneven, shifting under pressure. The light changed too, filtered and dim, cutting through layers of green that moved with a restless tension. Voices existed there, but not the kind that spoke in full sentences. Short calls. Urgent tones. The kind that carried meaning without explanation. Elias's breathing did not change, but the rhythm of the world around him had. In that other place, time did not stretch. It compressed. Decisions were not discussed. They were made. A young Marine, barely more than a boy, had stood a few feet away, his uniform too clean for where he had ended up, his hands tight around something he did not yet fully understand how to carry. His eyes had been wide, searching for direction, for certainty, for something solid to hold on to in a situation that offered none. And then there had been a moment, sharp and sudden, where everything narrowed. Not to fear. Not to panic. To focus. The kind that strips everything unnecessary away until only what matters remains. Elias had stepped forward then, not because someone told him to, but because there had been no one else who could. The piece of metal now hanging from the cord had not been a decoration. It had been part of something larger, something worn by someone who had not walked away from that moment alone. It had been handed over without ceremony, without witnesses, with a grip that carried more meaning than any words could have held. Not as a reward. Not as recognition. As a memory. A marker. Proof that someone had been there when it counted. The sound of the wind returned slowly, pulling the present back into place piece by piece. The gravel. The flag. The distant hum of the bass. Elias blinked once, and the memorial field came back into focus. The cadets were still there. Tyler still stood in front of him, though the certainty in his posture had thinned, almost imperceptibly. Noah had taken another half-step back without realizing it. Logan's arms were no longer crossed as tightly as before. And a few yards away, Staff Sergeant Hayes had stopped moving altogether, his eyes fixed on Elias with a recognition that had sharpened into something close to certainty. Tyler cleared his throat, the sound breaking the silence that had stretched longer than he intended. "You keep doing that," he said, forcing a small laugh that did not land. "Talking like everything means something more than it does." Elias looked at him again, fully present now, but the weight of where he had just been had not left his eyes. "It always does," he said quietly. The cord swayed once more, then settled against his chest, the metal resting exactly where it had been before. Nothing about it looked impressive. Nothing about it demanded attention. But the space around it had changed. And for the first time since the confrontation began, Tyler Brooks was no longer entirely sure he understood what he was holding control over. Staff Sergeant Daniel Hayes did not take another step forward, but everything about him had already shifted from observation to decision, and the difference was subtle enough that only someone trained to see it would have noticed. His shoulders squared just slightly, his stance grounded. Weight balanced like a man preparing to move fast without drawing attention. His eyes remained locked on Elias Mercer, not with curiosity anymore, but with recognition that had not fully formed into words yet. He had seen men like that before, though not many, and never in a place like this. Not during a controlled training morning under a clear American sky. There was something wrong with the picture, and it was not the old man. Hayes reached slowly into his pocket, keeping the movement small, deliberate, so it would not escalate the tension already hanging in the air. He pulled out his phone, the screen lighting briefly against his palm, and turned just enough to angle his body away from the cadets. His thumb moved quickly, not hesitating, not searching. He already knew who he needed to call. Behind him, the faint murmur of the onlookers had faded into a quiet that felt heavier than before, as if the entire field was holding its breath without realizing it. Tyler Brooks noticed the movement out of the corner of his eye, and it pulled at the fragile edge of his confidence again. "You calling this in?" he asked, trying to keep the challenge in his voice, though it no longer carried the same sharpness. Hayes did not look back. "I am making sure we do not make a mistake we cannot walk back," he said calmly, his voice low enough to keep it contained, but clear enough to reach Tyler all the same. The words landed differently this time. Not as a warning. As a fact. Tyler exhaled sharply through his nose, irritation flaring again, but it did not fully take hold. He shifted his stance, adjusting his grip on the training pistol, though the movement lacked the precision it had earlier. The weapon was still raised, still part of the scene, but it no longer defined it. Elias Mercer stood exactly as he had before, hands relaxed, gaze steady, the paracord and worn metal resting quietly against his chest as if it had always been there and always would be. Hayes stepped a few paces away now, creating just enough distance to keep the conversation contained, and brought the phone to his ear. It rang once. Twice. Then a voice answered, crisp, controlled, the kind that did not waste time on unnecessary words. Hayes did not introduce himself with rank or unit. He did not need to. I need you to pull a name, he said. A pause on the other end. Elias Mercer. The name hung in the air even though no one else could hear it through the line. Hayes's eyes flicked once toward the old man, then back toward the horizon as he listened. The response came quieter this time, slower. Hayes did not speak for a moment, his expression tightening almost imperceptibly as whatever he was hearing settled into place. That is what I thought, he said under his breath. Behind him, Tyler shifted again, watching, waiting, the tension now crawling under his skin in a way he could not ignore. Logan glanced between Tyler and Hayes, uncertainty creeping in where confidence had been just minutes ago. Noah had gone still entirely, his attention fixed on Elias, as if trying to understand something that could not be explained out loud. Hayes lowered the phone slightly, not ending the call, just enough to speak one more sentence into it, quieter than before, but with a weight that did not need volume. You might want to inform command, he said. And you might want to do it fast. He pulled the phone away then, the call ending with a soft tap, and turned back toward the scene unfolding in front of him. Nothing had changed on the surface. The cadets were still in place. The old man still stood in quiet stillness. The memorial field still stretched under the morning light. But beneath it, something had already begun to move, unseen, silent, and far more powerful than anything the cadets believed they controlled. The reaction did not begin on the field. It began in a quiet office 3 buildings away, where fluorescent lights hummed overhead and a junior officer stared at a terminal that had not been accessed in years. The name had been entered once, then again, slower the second time, as if retyping it might change what came back. It did not. The file did not open immediately. It lagged, hesitated, then unfolded in layers that were not meant for casual review. Clearance markers. Redacted lines. Dates that stretched back decades. The officer leaned forward, eyes narrowing, then widening, his posture shifting from routine to rigid in a matter of seconds. He did not read everything. He did not need to. The name alone was enough once it aligned with the record. His hand moved without hesitation to the phone beside the terminal. The line connected on the first ring. Sir, we have a situation, he said, voice controlled but tight at the edges. Across the base, inside a conference room where a briefing had been underway, Brigadier General Nathan Cole paused mid-sentence. The room was filled with quiet authority, charts projected on the wall, officers seated in disciplined rows, but something in the tone of that call cut through all of it. Cole turned slightly, one hand already reaching for the receiver. Go, he said simply. The officer on the other end did not waste words. Name confirmed. Elias Mercer. The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy, immediate, absolute. General Cole did not respond right away. His gaze shifted, not to the people in the room, but somewhere beyond them, as if aligning memory with the name he had just heard. When he finally spoke, his voice had dropped, losing the rhythm of the briefing entirely. Location, he said. The answer came fast. Memorial Training Field. Cadet Unit Exercise. There is, contact. That last word carried more than it said. Cole stood up without another question. Chairs scraped lightly as the officers in the room instinctively moved to rise, but he lifted a hand just enough to stop them. Hold here, he said. No explanation. No elaboration. He was already moving. The door opened, then closed behind him with a muted click that seemed louder than it should have been. His pace did not rush. It did not need to. It was direct, controlled, the kind of movement that did not allow for delay. Outside, the air hit cooler, the morning light sharper against the concrete paths. An aide stepped in beside him almost immediately, matching his stride. "Sir?" the aide asked. Cole did not slow. "Get transport to the memorial field," he said. "Now." The aide nodded, already moving ahead, voice low into a radio, words clipped and efficient. Back on the field, nothing visible had changed, but the weight in the air had deepened. Tyler Brooks felt it without understanding it, like pressure building before a storm you cannot see yet. He shifted again, glancing toward Hayes, then back to Elias, trying to reclaim the ground he felt slipping. "This is getting out of hand," he said, though the words sounded less certain now. Logan said nothing. Noah remained still, eyes fixed on the old man as if the answer to everything sat somewhere in the way he stood. Elias Mercer had not moved. Not an inch. The cord rested where it always had. The metal lay quiet against his chest. But the space around him felt different now, as if something unseen had begun to close in from beyond the edges of the field. Hayes stepped back into place, phone now lowered, his gaze steady, watchful. He did not look at the cadets. He looked at the man they had stopped. And in that look, there was no longer doubt. Only confirmation. Somewhere in the distance, faint at first, the low growl of an approaching vehicle began to cut through the morning air, steady, unmistakable, and coming fast enough to matter. The sound reached them before the vehicle came into view, a low, controlled engine note that cut cleanly through the morning air and did not belong to routine movement. It was steady, deliberate, closing the distance without hesitation. Tyler Brooks turned toward it instinctively, his focus breaking for the first time since the confrontation began. The training pistol in his hand lowered just a fraction, not enough to be obvious, but enough to show the shift. Logan followed his gaze. Noah did not move at all, his eyes still fixed on Elias Mercer, as if whatever answer he was searching for had already arrived. The vehicle rolled into view along the edge of the memorial field, dark, unmarked, its presence alone enough to change the rhythm of the space. It did not rush. It did not need to. It came to a smooth stop just short of the gravel line, engine idling low, controlled, like everything about it was measured. The door opened. Brigadier General Nathan Cole stepped out without ceremony, his uniform sharp against the pale morning light, his posture carrying a kind of authority that did not need to announce itself. He did not look at the cadets first. He did not look at the onlookers. His gaze went straight to Elias Mercer. And for the briefest moment, something in his expression shifted, not weakness, not surprise, but recognition, deep and immediate. He walked forward, each step even, unhurried, boots pressing into the gravel with a quiet, deliberate rhythm. The air around the cadets tightened. As he passed them without a word, Tyler straightened instinctively, the last of his confidence collapsing into protocol, his shoulders snapping back, the training pistol now fully lowered though he had not consciously decided to do it. Logan followed suit a half-second later. Noah was already still, his posture rigid, eyes forward. No one spoke. No one moved. General Cole stopped a few feet in front of Elias Mercer. For a heartbeat, the two men simply stood there, the space between them carrying more history than anyone else present could understand. Then, without announcement, without command, General Cole came to full attention. The motion was precise, practiced, absolute. And then he saluted. It was not quick. It was not casual. It was held, firm, deliberate, the kind of salute reserved for something far beyond rank alone. The effect was immediate. The field froze. The onlookers went silent. The cadets felt it like a physical force, the weight of that single gesture collapsing everything they thought they understood about the situation. Tyler's breath caught, his mind scrambling to realign what he was seeing with what he believed to be true just moments ago. Logan stared, unable to process it. Noah closed his eyes briefly, as if confirming something he had already begun to suspect. Elias Mercer did not return the salute right away. He looked at the general, steady, calm, as if this moment had always been inevitable. Then, slowly, he lifted his hand and returned it, not with display, not with force, but with the same quiet precision that had defined everything about him since the beginning. General Cole lowered his hand, but his posture remained firm. When he spoke, his voice was not loud, but it carried across the entire field with unmistakable clarity. "Cadet Brooks," he said, without turning his head. Tyler felt his name hit him like a shock. "Do you know who you have been addressing?" Tyler opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The answer he had before no longer existed. General Cole did not wait. "This is Elias Mercer," he continued, each word measured. "United States Marine Corps." A brief pause. Then, more quietly, but heavier. "The man who stood when others could not." The word settled over the field like a final verdict. And in that moment, every ounce of authority the cadets believed they held dissolved into something far smaller, far quieter, and far more permanent than any correction could undo. No one moved when the word settled. Not because they were ordered to stand still, but because there was nowhere left to go inside the moment that had just been revealed. Tyler Brooks felt the weight of it first in his chest, then in his hands, the training pistol now hanging useless at his side, no longer a symbol of control but a reminder of how quickly it had been misplaced. His mouth opened slightly, as if to respond, to correct, to explain, but nothing formed. There was no version of this situation where he could step back into the authority he had claimed minutes earlier. Logan's gaze dropped to the ground, his earlier confidence gone without a trace, replaced by something quieter, heavier. Noah stood rigid, eyes forward, but his expression had changed completely, no longer searching, no longer uncertain. He understood now. Not everything, but enough. General Cole shifted his stance slightly, turning just enough to face the cadets without breaking the line between himself and Elias Mercer. "Lower your weapon completely," he said, his tone even, controlled, leaving no room for interpretation. Tyler complied immediately, the motion precise now, stripped of ego, driven by instinct and the realization that he had crossed a line he had not even seen. The field remained silent, the only sound the faint movement of the flag overhead and the distant hum of base activity continuing as if nothing had happened, even though everything had. Cole stepped forward once more, closing the distance between himself and Elias, his posture softening just a fraction, not in authority, but in respect. His eyes moved briefly to the worn cord resting against Elias's chest, then back to the man himself. "Sir," he said quietly, the single word carrying more weight than rank ever could. Elias Mercer inclined his head slightly, not as acknowledgement of status, but as recognition of understanding. Nothing more was needed between them. Behind them, Staff Sergeant Hayes exhaled slowly, the tension that had built in his frame easing just enough to confirm what he had known before the call had even connected. This had never been about enforcement. It had been about recognition. Cole turned back toward the cadets fully now, his expression composed, controlled, but unmistakably firm. "You will step back," he said. "You will stand at attention. And you will remember this moment for the rest of your careers." The words were not raised. They did not need to be. Tyler stepped back first, boots pressing into the gravel with a quiet crunch that seemed louder than it should have been. Logan followed immediately. Noah was already there, posture locked, eyes forward. No one spoke. No one dared to. The correction did not come with shouting. It came with clarity. Cole reached out then, not abruptly, but with deliberate care, and adjusted the cord at Elias's chest, straightening the worn metal where it rested, as if restoring something that had never truly been out of place. The gesture was small, almost invisible to anyone not paying close attention, but it carried a significance that echoed far beyond the field. "You are where you are supposed to be," Cole said quietly. Elias's gaze moved past him then, back to the line of memorial plaques, the names etched into metal that caught the morning light. For a moment, the field returned to what it had been before the interruption. Still. Quiet. Respectful. And then Elias stepped forward, not hurried, not hesitant, simply continuing the path he had been on before anyone had tried to stop him. The cadets remained in place as he passed, their eyes fixed ahead, but the awareness of his presence pressed against them in a way that would not fade. No command was given for a salute this time. None was needed. The silence itself held it. General Cole watched him go, posture still firm, gaze steady, and for a brief moment, the entire field seemed to align around the quiet movement, as if something had been corrected that had never been meant to break in the first place. And in the stillness that followed, the lesson remained, not spoken, not written, but understood in a way that would last far longer than any order ever could.